how many people have had 2 or 3 beers and said they want to start a brewery.
Hi, I'm Danielle, and you're listening to Unboxing Humans. Tara Hankinson, the co-founder of Talea Beer Co, grew up immersed in the wine and hospitality industry. After earning her undergraduate degree in business management from Bucknell University, Tara moved to New York City to work in philanthropy and later received her MBA from NYU while pursuing an interest in wine. Tara realized no beer companies were speaking to consumers like her the way wineries and other brands were. She joined the beer startup Hopsy, where she met her future Talea co-founder, Leanne Darland. The two quickly formed a bond, and Talea Beer Co.'s first beer was released in 2019. The two now have 4 tap rooms across Williamsburg, Cobble Hill, the West Village, and Bryant Park. And their beer can be found in thousands of retailers across New York State, including Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, Michelin-starred restaurants, and cocktail bars. Tara, welcome to Unboxing Humans.
Thank you for having me, Danielle.
I am a huge fan of Talea. I first learned about the company in 2021 and have just been completely hooked ever since, which I know is not unique to me. You started the company in 2019 and opened the first tap room in 2021. So 2.5 years and now 4 tap rooms in New York City and more than 16 beers and counting. What was the moment you knew you had something special with Talea?
That's a great question. I think as an entrepreneur growing a business, I will always challenge myself to see if I still think that is true. I believe we're onto something. I believe we're growing. I believe our product resonates with the market and that we will be very successful. But I think it's important to constantly reevaluate how you're doing and how the markets change, how the conditions change, how your customers are changing, and whether their needs are different. Leanne and I met in April 2018. Leanne's my co-founder. We were working together at a beer startup company here in New York City. And within a couple of months, realized that we had joined that company for the same reason, which is we had a passion for beer. We weren't ready to leave our corporate career paths. But when we met and we realized that we both wanted to open a brewery, we decided we were ready to leave and spent about 9 months building the business before we left our jobs in 2019. So I think in that period of the kernel of an idea getting built into a pitch deck and a financial model and a business plan and starting to talk with consumers and tasting products, we felt like we were really onto something. I think the validation is still, we're still trying to make the best product market fit, but that original hypothesis has proved out. And I think the first time we opened our taproom doors in March 2021, within a few weeks, we had a line out the door and we were like, okay, something's working.
That's incredibly validating to have a line out the door within the first few weeks. I read that both of your parents worked in wine importing and restaurant management. Did you always know you wanted to go into that?
I was highly discouraged by my parents to get into hospitality and food and beverage. It's a very punishing industry. The lifestyle is very challenging in terms of long hours, typically historically not paid well, but I found myself seeing hospitality everywhere in the way that I approached customer experiences in my professional jobs, in the way that I just was. Like, I loved hosting dinner parties. I loved cooking and loved the ceremony around things like that. And I couldn't stay away from it.
What was it like growing up around that environment?
When I was 7, we moved from the suburbs of New York to Pennsylvania, and the job, my father had moved on from hospitality. He went to law school. He's now a chief legal officer, so obviously a very different path. But my mom was a full-time mom and had to work because of our financial situation. So she tried finding restaurants that would make sense for her to work at. They needed to be successful enough and sophisticated enough to hire someone from New York City who was giving up being with their kids to work there. And I think that was really hard to find in the suburbs. I think the hours that you work in hospitality are really hard. It's a very physical job, whether you're front of house or back of house. It's very unstable. Restaurants themselves are so risky. So many of them close in the first few years. It just feels like a bit of an uphill battle to succeed. But like my parents, that's just the way that they were. Every holiday meal was very ornate and everyone had a task that they had to do to, like, you're trimming the green beans, you're peeling the potatoes, and a lot of storytelling. And I think that still brings my family together. And you don't need to have worked at the best restaurant in New York to understand the magic that happens when you bring people together for a food and beverage experience. So at the end of the day, right now, I love beer. I love hospitality. I'm still a business person, and I'm a business person first. And we found a great opportunity in craft beer that we think exists across the country. We're still only a New York City, New York State based brand, but the opportunity that we're trying to seize is bigger than craft beer. It's bigger than New York City. The way our mentality is, we're more of a startup than a restaurant. It's just opening a family restaurant. So eventually they acquiesced to my desires and invested in the business, which is great. But yeah, I learned a lot from them. When we first opened, my dad, the first few weekends, was like in the dish pit in our kitchen. And my mom was the bathroom attendant, basically, because we have 4 restrooms here at Williamsburg. But, you know, when in those peak hours, we have a very short peak period that's Saturday afternoons, there could be 15 people in line despite having 4 bathrooms. So my sister worked for me when we opened, and my husband, who is so not of this industry, wore like gardening gloves and was busting all of our tables. So fortunately, we've been able to get to a point where we can hire people and now they can come and enjoy our new openings. But it was very funny. It was a very surreal experience for me.
I mean, that's definitely an all hands on deck experience. And your bathrooms are very clean.
My mom left an impression.
I do judge a restaurant sometimes by its bathrooms, and the Talea bathrooms are always wonderful. It sounds like they came around and that your love for hospitality really was instilled from a young age.
Yes. I think that it's just very funny because New York City has changed so much since, it's 40 years ago when my parents were working in the industry. But, at that point, French food was the pinnacle of cuisine. And like, it was disruptive to have local vegetables or local beer or American wine, God forbid. But I think it was always a part of it. And I think for Leanne, she also felt a tug to the community that hospitality businesses create. She fell in love with craft beer when she was in the Navy and stationed in San Diego. And obviously, Navy is a very rigorous, regimented place. And going to local craft breweries in Southern California was her opportunity to let her hair down and connect with people. So I think that is a very common thread for many people.
It's so interesting that the different paths that you both took led you to say, this is where I feel at home and where I can let my hair down. And that feeling definitely comes through. So you went to Bucknell and you studied management, and then you worked in consulting for a little bit. Why was it important for you to go into the consulting side of the business?
Well, first, after Bucknell, I didn't have a job graduating 2009. So I eventually got placed through a temp agency at a endowment-based foundation, the Andrew Mellon Foundation. So I was working in grant making. And then I wasn't very challenged. So I decided to go back to business school, went to NYU as a full-time MBA student. And that was an opportunity to work on projects for companies that I was interested in, which was mostly CPG, alcohol, and hospitality. And I wanted to get the most challenging job that I could tolerate, that would pay the most money in my mind. Of course, my salary went down, down, and down after that, down to 0 when we started the business. But I think I always felt a little bit of like I was a bit of an underdog, and consulting is a place where you can learn a lot very quickly and a lot of great models for how to interact with clients, which I wasn't at the time thinking, wow, this will help me pitch investors, but it definitely did.
Why did you see yourself as an underdog?
Because I didn't find myself professionally coming out of college. I knew I didn't want to do a more traditional career path, and things like LinkedIn and job networking boards were just really emerging at that point. So it felt pretty challenging to me to get a job that I was passionate about. I was interested in being with a mission driven company, which made sense why I ended up at a foundation, but I felt like I was way underperforming in my job in the sense that I was underutilized. And I think coming out of a college where I'm very competitive, it just was hard to find myself. And I didn't have much success in consulting either. The networking and selling yourself that was required in the corporate world, I just wasn't one of those people who was on a meteoric rise. And it was very frustrating to me to see people excel with much less experience or who I thought were way less compelling or less smart or whatever they were. You watch people excel and you're not. And so that I think became a reason that I went from consulting to the New York Times, where I felt the same way. And then I was like, well, at least at a startup, I have to make an impact because there are only like 10 people in this company. So I
Yeah.
will make a difference. And I think Leanne felt similarly. She was at Google in internal finance. And when you're in a really big company, it's hard to feel like you matter or that you're very connected to the end product. So for her to leave that company to go to the beer startup where we met, it was a way for her to be attached to a more tangible good and a small company where she knew she could make an impact.
Was there any point where you thought maybe beer isn't for me or hospitality isn't for me and I should do something totally different? Or did you always sort of have your eye on, I want to get back in, like I want to be in hospitality. That's where I belong.
I was looking for a consumer good or hospitality. At the New York Times, my role was in customer experience. So one of the big responsibilities I had was synthesizing customer feedback from all of our different channels and providing that feedback to make the New York Times better, whether it was in account management or feedback around the diversity of opinions in the op-ed section, for example. And that's great. New York Times is aligned to my personal philosophy. So I did feel a connection to that mission as well. But it's still very abstract considering how few people are actually getting a physical paper, and it's an app and it's reading. Yeah, you can see it at Herald News Station or whatever in Grand Central, but it wasn't the same thing as seeing someone wear a tote bag that you helped create. So I think I was looking for some sort of connection to a physical object.
And in this case, then with Talea, physical object and space, it
Mhm.
definitely came together. So you ended up at Hopsy, like you said, and your customer experience role at the New York Times seemed like definitely helped you as you were the head of customer experience. What did that entail?
My responsibility was at the most elementary level, glorified customer service, but in a company that was fueled by a strategic investor and trying to grow very quickly without a completely polished back end system. Customer service was very crucial because, I mean, we had a great tech team, but there's so many things that startups do that are very manual that no one knows as the end consumer. Like, we've all heard the stories of people starting cosmetics companies where they're the ones packing the boxes and bringing them to UPS, right? Well, on the tech side of Hopsy, there was a lot of manual spreadsheets for CRM and things like that. So it was really the only human element of the company was reaching out to the customer experience team. So I grew that team from 2 people internal to 6 or 7 people full-time salaried employees, and then 6 or 7 people in the Philippines, and then 6 or 7 people remote, basically minimum wage. It was very ungainly, but I really like managing people and I like the challenge of that. And then the other big component of the job was not just the service, but retention. It was a subscription based business, similar to the New York Times. So they had a bundled offer that included a 3-month subscription. And obviously, there's a huge drop off at the end of that prepayment of 3 months before people or as people are getting billed for their real first month of the subscription. So I really liked the work, but I think working those kind of hours, which are very similar to consulting, and had options in the company, but you're still not an owner. And so I think Leanne and I, that was part of what brought us together is we were working really hard. And it was like, I could be really working hard for something that's my own also, maybe instead.
And how did you and Leanne become friends within the company? I mean, there's only so many of you, but what initially
Yeah.
bonded you together?
There were only 4 or 5 people in the New York City, the office team. One was the CEO, one was the director of marketing. And then me and Leanne, and we were the only two women. She was new to New York City. She had just moved to New York City a month before from the San Francisco Bay Area. And so I think it was like, I didn't have kids at the time. So I would get to work around 8:30 and be there till 7:30 or 8 most nights. It's a lot of meals that you need to eat in that span of time. So we would get lunch together. We would eat dinner together or go out for drinks or have a beer because it was a beer company. We always had beer around. And I think at one point we were just talking about, another big portion of the company was sourcing. So basically Hopsy would repackage beer that they bought at a low cost from local breweries into their proprietary system. So seeing which breweries were succeeding and didn't even entertain our offers. On my side, seeing the customer purchasing patterns, what beer were people most excited about? What would people buy as soon as it went up for sale? So you start to learn some consumer patterns around craft beer. And that conversation organically turned into like, I'd love to have a brewery. We see all these other breweries and how their inner workings are. So it evolved from there.
And were those insights where this like craft curious consumer came to be?
No, the genesis of, saying that you want to start a brewery, like how many people have had 2 or 3 beers and said they want to start a brewery? Lots of people.
Right.
Like Leanne always jokes, she's like, I would say, I want to start something. I'm going to start a cupcake company. And like, I've theoretically in my mind started many companies that never actually saw the light of day. So that kernel of an idea, just, I think the kind of energy and harnessing of the frustration we felt of like, let's do something on our own. But I had been thinking about that beforehand because I had spent the summer after business school working at Wolfer Estate, shadowing all different, it's a winery in the Hamptons, shadowing all the different functions of their office and wholesale and the tasting rooms. And I had been thinking about how that experience didn't exist in craft beer. And because craft beer is primarily the manufacturer experience you get in an urban area, there aren't many urban wineries, there aren't that many urban distilleries. So it did feel like an opportunity to bring an experience that was elevated like a winery, that was geared towards a bit of a different person than a brewery, to New York City. So it was an idea that I had been thinking about and had gotten as far as like doing the research to what it would take to bring a beer to market. But I never got over the hump of actually, taking some screenshots of inspiration for packaging and going on the New York State Liquor Authority website. So meeting Leanne was a catalyst. And we both always say that we wouldn't have been able to do it without the other one because there is a level of accountability that you have when you're working with someone else that I couldn't get to on my own.
I love that story for so many reasons. The first is that I feel like in the startup world, everything is like, when did you have the aha moment? And it's as if like one day something just like hits you and suddenly you know exactly what your company is and you go and you start it. And what I found is that like that's usually not the case. And people have the idea of brewing, no pun intended, for a while. All of the pieces slowly come together and then it hits like, oh my God, this thing I've been thinking about in some way or another. Now there's an impetus for it. What was it about the two of you together? How did you go from let's do this to then actually creating it and not just creating it in your heads?
Definitely one night with a few bottles of wine. We had the head of marketing at the time was interested in the idea of starting something with us, but then he got an amazing opportunity he couldn't turn down on the West Coast. So we had kind of talked about it. And then one night we hung out, and I think it just became reaching a level of or belief that let's explore it. And background is finance and operations. That is not my focus area or a huge strength of mine. So we also had very complementary skill sets, and that I think made it very easy to work together from the start, because I had the hospitality experience or the wherewithal, and then she had raised money, gone through 2 rounds of funding with Hopsy. So she knew how to raise money and how to pitch to people. And it was very seamless. And it's kind of funny, lots of people date or are engaged for a really long time before they get married. And within 3 or 4 months of meeting each other, we are so more financially bound than most couples, at least couples who don't have kids, because it's a different thing. But like, we now owe millions of dollars of debt together. We've guaranteed 5 leases to spaces together. So maybe on the surface, it was like, hey, we're just talking about, could we start a brewery? But look down the road 5 years and you're like, oh yeah, they jumped into something that's really a huge commitment. Obviously it didn't start that way. It grew over time.
You started with brewing a few beers. I think you worked with a subcontractor, right? And you created some recipes. Was the tap room always part of the plan?
Yes. So the first idea we had was like, let's brew a beer and get it on the shelf at Whole Foods. That would be the craziest, coolest thing ever. And when we started to look into the economics of that, we realized we would never be able to support ourselves unless we were doing that at a very big scale. And there are a lot of brands who do that where, you're unprofitable for a long time until you reach a volume that makes sense from an economies of scale perspective. But Leanne had met a brewery owner in San Francisco who quickly became our mentor. The company is called Bear Bottle, and their CEO was a few years ahead of our concept. And he was like, you should build a tap room. It's the fastest growing part of the craft beer world. And once we had that idea planted in our head, the more research we did, it just made sense. It makes sense from the financial perspective of the margins, but because we can't ship beer out of New York State, so our version of direct to consumer is selling beer across the counter. But it also made sense because we discovered that in some cities like Denver, Colorado, you can have 24 or 25 breweries for every 100,000 people. And in New York at the time, there were 0.2 breweries for every 100,000 people, because there is such a population density in New York City that even with 30 or 35 breweries at the time, that's like nothing. So there are small towns in Maine that probably have 30 breweries. So we felt like there was also an opportunity just from, population that did not have access to craft beer, or a lot of breweries that were targeting one customer, and we had a different type of customer. So that was the genesis for the tap room. It was always our plan. That's what we fundraised for. Well, I shouldn't say bootstrap because we lost money, but we self-funded contract brewing beers to get our business going. And in April 2019, we left our jobs. We had our first beer package and we started fundraising. We contract brewed with Torch and Crown in New York City. We did our own sales and distribution. And that was our proof of concept while we were fundraising to build the brewery. Whole Foods was one of our first accounts. They brought in our first 2 beers into all their stores with 2 cases per beer, which is amazing. And then they were like, this is your responsibility now. You have to go sell to the individual buyers. But that was a huge leg up. They're still one of our best customers today. It was always part of the plan, but obviously the scale and complexity of owning a brick and mortar space is different than contract brewing a brand. And we only had me, Leanne, and a brewer at the time versus the staff we need today to support a full-fledged physical operation.
That is totally crazy. So your dream of one day will be into Whole Foods, and wouldn't that be so cool? Actually became your first account?
They weren't the first, but they
Oh,
were the first people we sampled on the beer. So, like the day after packaging our first beer, we had met them at a conference put on by Cherry Bomb, the female-focused food media company. And Whole Foods was a sponsor. They were sampling. I don't remember what they were sampling. And we approached them and we were like, we had these stupid, but really cute little cards, like a 3x5, like, we're making a beer soon. And somehow they let us get their business card. And then we asked to talk to the beer buyer. And then we packaged the beer on, say, like a Monday. And then that Wednesday, we were driving to New Jersey to sample them on the beer. And it's funny, we're coming at it from such a professional lens. So we meet the beer buyer. We're still really close with him. And we had our whole pitch deck printed out, like to investor pitch deck. And we're like, and this is why women will drink our beer. And this is the experience of the tavern. He's like, yeah. I just want to try it. And he tried it and he's like, it's good. I don't need you to do a whole pitch thing. But yeah, it was amazing. But it was also like, this was completely not financially viable. So that's great. But every delivery day, we're basically losing money. So contract brewing at the scale we did it was a losing game, but it was what we needed to do to seed the market and develop a reputation so that when we eventually opened, people had already had our beer and heard of us and knew what to expect from a quality perspective. It legitimized us to other accounts as well to get into Whole Foods right off the bat, basically. Then we could tell, the bodega on the corner that like, we're good enough for Whole Foods. So you should buy our beer.
talk a little bit about your customer and how you discovered them.
Yeah, I agree that there was no one epiphany, but there was a moment for me when I was working at Wolfer and was out at lunch on a Saturday in the Hamptons. And I was like, I would love a beer. I don't really want a glass of wine. And none of the tap handles, which all of the tap handles are, incredibly masculine and ugly. Like, oh, right, great. Another baseball shaped tap handle. Oh, that one looks like a shark. Cool. It was just obvious to me that none of these breweries at the restaurant I was at were thinking of female consumers. At best, once Leanne and I started talking about it, there are craft beer brands that are gender neutral, or a brand like Brooklyn Brewery, which is one of the great craft breweries of America that's been around for 20 plus years. Their branding is still very sports inspired and I would say still leans on the masculine side of gender neutral. So our idea was that if we feel this way, which when Leanne's friends would visit her in San Francisco, she'd say, I want to go to a brewery. And all of her friends are like, no, I want to dress up and go to a winery and have a really cute Instagrammable experience. We must not be the only ones. And when we started to dig into the data, we found that women were the fastest growing segment in craft beer, growing twice as fast as the market itself. And that there was a statistic from Nielsen that 72% of female craft beer drinkers felt that they were being treated as an afterthought by craft beer brands. So that's someone who's already drinking craft beer and they feel like they're not being attended to as a customer. So we had this hunch that there was room in the market to target female consumers. I would say a lot of our customers are craft curious, but we also have a lot of customers who are coming because it's a cute space and they want an espresso martini. But if we can convince them to try a sour beer before they leave, that's a win. And we've also found that there's a huge halo effect. When we were pitching, people would say, my wife doesn't drink beer. Okay, well, you're raising money. So you're probably talking to like a 55 plus year old white man and his 55 plus year old wife doesn't drink beer. Okay, well, I don't care what she's doing because that's a different generation than a millennial or Gen Z. And then we talked to people who said, well, my younger daughter, she's in college. She doesn't drink craft beer. She drinks White Claw. She's also not our customer because no one drank good quality stuff in college. no one was drinking craft. I thought Blue Moon was craft beer in college. So the investor product fit was off for a lot of them, but we found enough investors who totally got it. And then the customer product market fit, I think that is one part of our company that has basically come true the way we expected to, which is really great. We find that about 2/3 of our customers are women, like 2/3 of our reservations that are made, 2/3 of our rewards program. When we've done head counts in the weekends, it's majority female. But, you also get just people who feel comfortable in our spaces. Like we have a lot of LGBTQI plus customers. We have a lot of people bringing their families or their parents. So it's been really exciting to see that hunch play out.
I'm curious about how you built the brand with that hunch. I know the name Talea is the combination of your name and Leanne's name, which was just the most fun fact that I found out recently. And I mean, down to your packaging. I read that you said you wanted a beer that you could bring to a baby shower.
Yes. Yeah. I think I know you love experiences in physical spaces. And that is the biggest investment we've made is these expensive build outs of spaces that feel nice to be in and don't feel like a beer bar. But we started as a CPG brand. We started as something that people are pulling off the shelves or ordering off of a menu. So if you're ordering off of a menu at a bar, the name of the beer, the ABV, the style, any tasting notes have to be something desirable to a customer. And when we started, we were selling into craft beer places because they were the only ones who would take a chance on a new brand like us. So, the craft beer nerds had to like our product. It's great that Whole Foods bought our beer because the majority of their customers are women shopping during the day. But, all the beer bars who have beer in the name of their bar are not necessarily not our target market, but is not the people who we're designing the company for. And they still bought. So I think for us, going back to your question, the idea was that women are already drinking craft beer, not many of them, but some. People are already curious about craft beer. But when I think of a consumer's experience and how they're curating their life, aesthetics matter, taste, flavor, the story of a brand matters. And to me, that idea of creating a space and a product that someone would feel comfortable bringing to a primarily female focused event, it was a huge opportunity. And it was one of the, beliefs we had is that there was a gap in the market for that. Obviously, in the past few years, you have so many products that fit that now. Spiked coconut waters, hard seltzer, functional, non-alc beverages. But people still just drink regular beer, which is what our beer is. We make non-alcoholic beer. And a lot of those beers are not aesthetically something that you'd want on a bar at your wedding or like to bring to a girls' night in a 4-pack.
It sounds throughout like you were really building for yourselves and you knew that this customer existed because you and Leanne were both her. And I've had that experience, and I expressed to you when we first met that your spaces felt like a place that I actually wanted to work in and be in, but also hang out in, and how rare that is for truly any space. I'm curious about all of the events that you host in the space and how you've turned it really into a third place, as they say. When did your first event come to be? And when did you say we could use this space for something more than people drinking on a Saturday afternoon?
We always had that as part of the business plan. Wolfer did yoga in the vines. So when I was there, bring your yoga mat out to a grassy patch by the vines and had yoga. I have a lot of allergies, so it did not go well for me. I have a sinus infection right now. I'm recovering, but it was like literally just sneezing and downward dog. Whatever. My
That
point
sounds like the
being,
worst way to sneeze.
yeah, I think it was on a work morning too. It's like, I'll do yoga and then I'll go up to the office. And it was just like my whole face was, I felt so puffy, but we have customers who don't know beer, who might not like beer. So that's not going to be compelling to them. How do you signal to them that this is a space for them and that we get them and that they should trust us and try our beer? So even in our original pitch decks, we talked about taproom yoga and doing events like just about women investing in themselves. And that has become such an important part of the brand because it allows us to work with companies who we admire, who we want to support, and whose audiences we want to expose ourselves to. It is a great way to utilize the other, 95% of the week when we're not completely packed. So we have these big spaces and happy hours are great. We have a lot of people who work from our spaces too, but we still have a lot of underutilized time. So it's also a revenue play, but we don't make much money off of them. Most of them, it is truly for bringing people in who wouldn't find us otherwise and being an amenity to the neighborhood and to our community, giving people a space to come to an event like that. It's also, I think, why we have had a lot of success with our collaborations with other brands. So we just released our collaboration with Fly Beijing, the Asian chili spice company, and they have oils, they have peppers, and it's a female-founded company, and they don't have a physical space because they're a product that goes on their shelf. And so by us working with them and creating a beer in collaboration with them, it's a way for them to reach New York City customers and activate a physical space. And it's a great way for us to challenge ourselves and brewing something new and introducing our customers to a product and a brand that we love. So I think a lot of brands have built really successful businesses without brick and mortar, but we have that. And it's a very easy lever for us to pull when we work with someone.
I think that's one of the great things about Talea is that there's always something new and interesting going on that make me say, oh, I'm excited to see your email. Very few brands, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to open this email, right? But I see a Talea email and I actually open it. I don't send it to trash or to spam. I'm like, this is going to have something interesting. And without fail, it always does. What's the future of Talea look like?
Well, first of all, thank you for opening our emails. We put a lot of work into them. And I think even more work into keeping ourselves relevant and exciting and investing in these kind of projects. It's a lot of work to pull off at least 2 to 3 community events every week and a new collab, usually every 6 to 8 weeks. But I think that our customers are not the rabid craft beer fans that are just following for, oh, wow, another hazy double IPA, another of this beer. They want more than that. And that's not that compelling to them. So by having these collaborations that are more lifestyle focused or that are with these cool brands who are doing great things in their own spaces that are not beer, it's challenging, it's fun, and it keeps our customers excited. The future, we just opened our 2 Manhattan tap rooms, West Village in October and Bryant Park in December. So now we have 4 tap rooms total. And our goal is just grow the business and make those tap rooms the best they can be this year. We want to invest in making every person's experience amazing. Everything from redoing menu design, launching a new food menu this year, continuing to do these collabs, as well as making our beer more accessible to more people. So the reason we built in Manhattan is we want to meet people where they are. I don't tell anyone. I don't live in Brooklyn anymore. I moved to the suburbs, and people in the suburbs deserve great beer too. So we've always distributed a little bit in Westchester, but now we're expanding distribution to Rochester, New York, still all in New York State. And that's really exciting because it's a new demographic who might not know anything about us. So it's a whole new challenge. We also launched our first packaged non-alcoholic beer. So we've been selling draft non-alc for over a year, but our spritzy sour, which is made with strawberry and lemon, is available for shipping nationwide. That'll be the first time we can ship anything but merch nationwide. So I'm excited to see what regions of America that resonates with and hopefully change the perception about non-alcoholic craft beer, which usually it's IPAs and lagers, and she's a sour. So much more in line with what we believe our customer likes from a flavor profile perspective.
I have the non-alcoholic sours in my fridge right now. It's actually, for me and my fiance, we love your beers, but like we never end the night with a drink as the other people do. And it allowed us to basically like have this treat when we wanted something different, but didn't want the alcohol because we have, both of us have a lot of work and have to be up early for work and have long hours. So drinking every day wasn't in the cards, but we were like, oh my God, another way that we get to enjoy Talea. And that's how I always feel. It's like that customer experience just always comes through with Talea and in every experience I have with the brand. So thank you. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Since you've made it to the end of the show, I'm going to take a wild guess that you enjoyed listening. So go ahead, check out the links in the show notes and give us a follow. We both know you want to. Unboxing Humans is hosted by me, Danielle Boris. To learn more about my work, go to danielleboris.com and don't forget to grab your copy of my new book, The Energy of Weirdos. See you next week and have a fantastic rest of your day.